there's this way of relating that we all kind of adopt. Everybody's a little bit different in the way that they relate. Everybody's way of relating is driven by the people they relate to. Now, you've heard me say many times on this podcast that the 5 people around you will drive your future. They will help determine your destiny. And they will either drive you to be a better leader or a failure. I know that sounds harsh, but let me give you one example of the way that the 5 people closest to you will influence your leadership for better or for worse. I was enjoying my morning reading the other day in a Panera Bread, and as I sat there, I watched a couple of guys come in. One was probably, I don't know, close to 80 years old, just based on the way that he moved and the look and the way that he spoke and all those kinds of things. And then a couple of ladies came in behind them, and I would say the 2 ladies were probably in their mid to late 40s, tops. I mean, that's the oldest I would have expected them to be. And as I sat there and they stood in line, the older gentleman paid for his breakfast and his drink, and he reached to grab his cup. And when he pulled it off, the static caused 2 cups to stick together, which didn't separate until he had moved it off the stack and away from the counter, and it fell onto the floor. Well, he kind of looked around embarrassed a little bit. He reached down and picked up the cup, and he put it back on the stack, and then he turned with his cup to go get the drink. And this is where leakage from relationship traumas, relationship habits, relationship practices begins to impact the way you influence other people, whether it's intentional or not. The lady in line behind him began to scold him like a 5-year-old. She said, "Really? You're just going to put that nasty cup back on there? Don't you realize it's been on the floor? Do you want to drink out of a cup that's been on the floor? I don't think so. I think you should have put the cup back on there that never touched the floor. I don't think that..." As I sat there, I thought, wow, I don't think I would talk to my own child that way. I mean, that wasn't even a proper lecture, thank you, parents. It was a scolding, it was a demeaning, it was embarrassing, it was humiliating. The old guy finally just turned around and took the cup off the stack, and he's like, "Well, what do you want me to do with it?" She said, "Well, I don't really care. Just don't put it back on there because I don't want to drink out of it." It was really kind of a sad moment in time. But from a leadership perspective, I want to ask you, do you allow the people in your life, either the ones talking to you or the ones that you talk to, the way of relating to others, does that also leak into your leadership? I'd venture to say that it does. You may or may not be aware of it. The other question I want to ask you is, if you're aware of it, is it intentional? Do you allow that to happen and you're perfectly okay with it? Or does it just happen because you hadn't really thought about it? See, that situational awareness makes all the difference in the world. It may have been a natural reaction for her to scold the guy because she scolds everybody. It may have been a natural reaction to her because she sees a lot of people do stupid things, and she feels like the only way the world will be right is if she personally corrects every one of them. Of course, it caused me to reflect as I sat there, asking myself, if I were standing in line behind him and he dropped a cup on the floor and then put it back on the stack, what would I do? Would I have scolded him? And this is not necessarily for a comparison, but for me to be intentional and aware of how I react in the same type of scenario. And I thought through the whole process, and I think, honestly, I probably would have watched the whole scenario unfold, standing in line, and when the old man walked away, I would have reached up and taken the cup off of the stack and handed it to the cashier and said, "That particular cup has been on the floor. Perhaps you don't want to sell that one." And then moved on with my transaction. I don't know that humiliating the old man was of any value whatsoever. I don't think there was any benefit that anyone else gained from having witnessed the scenario or having been a part of it. I believe if anything was accomplished in this dressing down of the old man over a cup on the floor, it was that her ego was left intact and her opportunity to correct someone else and prove just how right she is prevailed. Is that the way you lead? Is it be right at all costs, regardless of how it makes others feel? Is it leading from a position of my own past, my own wounding, my own hurts, my own sense of inferiority that I've got to fight back to get my prominence? I've got to make sure that everyone knows I'm here and I'm in charge? Because insecure leaders aren't leaders at all. They may have titles. They don't really lead. They bully, they manipulate, they cajole, and they harm. They don't really lead. That doesn't mean they don't have influence. Influence is leadership. Think about that for a second. Do you want to be led by someone who's insecure, who just needs to make sure they vocalize that they're in charge, that they have an opinion, and that you should follow it? Doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. I want to leave you with that thought today, though. Do the relationships around you, the drama from your family, the bad leaders of the past, your friends and the way that they relate to each other, always poking and goading and harassing and annoying each other, do those things leak into the way that you lead people that you're responsible for? And if they do, is it on purpose? Is it intentional? So just a heads up for those of you who follow Leading Leaders podcast, beginning in the month of May, I'm going to be focusing on a new environment for Leading Leaders podcast. And what I mean by that is a little different use of some technology mixes, a little different use of the way it's presented. We'll test it for a little while and see how it works, see how people respond. But one of the things that I really want to focus on is brevity. When I teach communicators, when I train communicators, one of the things that I teach people to do is to focus on a story that's 2 minutes in length. Now for Facebook Live, 2 minutes gets lost in the mix very, very fast. So you'll have to pay close attention. I'll be more specific about having it on the air at 6:30 a.m. for the live portion. The edited portion will be re-released a little bit later, but it will be no more than 5 minutes every time starting tomorrow going forward. It won't be a 20-minute teaching, it won't be a 30-minute teaching, it won't be a full episode. It will be 5 minutes max. In fact, I may just go buy me an egg timer today so you can hear it ding when we reach that point. And at that point, I'll just stop talking. It will be my effort to make it all fit within that 5 minutes. The open, the body, and the close within 5 minutes. But if the timer goes off, the video will go off. So I won't take up any more than your time than 5 minutes from here going forward. If you want me to talk longer than that, then let's talk about a speaking engagement. Until then, I hope that you will think about the relationships that you have and how they feed into your leadership style. Are you intentional or are you leaking your leadership? I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching the Leading Leaders podcast on Tell It Like It Is TV.